Skytalkers is a member of the Star Wars Escape Pods Network. Explore more great content and get to know our sister shows at weareescapepods.com and on Twitter at weareescapepods. The Star Wars Escape Pods Network, promoting positivity in fandom.
Welcome to Skytalkers Fulcrum Files, where Caitlin and Charlotte break down the latest episode of Star Wars Rebels. An in-depth discussion commencing in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Fulcrum Files, part of the Skytalkers feed. I'm Charlotte.
Hey guys, I'm Caitlin, and welcome to the return of Fulcrum Files. We have 3 more episodes of Fulcrum Files left.
Including this one.
Which is just, it's kind of crazy. I was so excited for Rebels to come back, and now it's almost over.
It's back and it is going.
It's back and then it's gone. So,
yes.
What a doozy this return was.
Oh my God. Let's just talk about how watching this was maybe the most emotional I've ever been in Star Wars. It's comparable to the third time I saw The Last Jedi and I completely lost it.
Yeah.
In the Luke and Leia scene.
Oh,
Caitlin.
Yeah. No.
Like it was the same level where just, like, I couldn't stop, where it was like taking over my body when I was crying.
It's weird. Because I was thinking about that too, because the first time we saw The Last Jedi, I don't think either one of us cried at all. Because I don't think we really were able to take in what was happening. But you're right, the second and third time it just like hit you like a ton of bricks what was happening in The Last Jedi. Whereas with this episode of Rebels, I don't know if it's because we all knew it was coming or what, but I just broke. I was like, what? And I don't even think I cried that hard, even in our second and third viewings of The Last Jedi, as I did watching Rebels last night. It was just like a lot of emotions, and even like rewatching it today and like Rebels. I watched Rebels Recon this morning at like 7 a.m. and was just bawling into my coffee cup.
I was too, trying to put on makeup. Yeah. I was like slapping on my foundation.
Trying to put on your eyeliner, but it's not waterproof.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, this show.
It was so sad. There's that moment where they're talking about how Dave didn't tell the Rebels, like the cast, that this was happening. And you just see Freddie like put his head in his hands and wipe his eyes. And you're like, no.
It's just so sad. You think about these actors and how they've just become so attached to their characters. And they had no idea where it was going. Like, oh my God, they just found out right then. I'm just like... so emotional thinking about that, and then how Dave had to like come into the recording booth,
enter into
kind
the
of
recording,
have like a powwow with them,
like a therapy session.
I'm just so sad.
I know, and then I was thinking too about when they were recording Doom and how they're all being like. I bet they record. I bet that was part of the thing, right? It was like, we're going to tell them this now to get the emotion of it, so that they haven't like premeditated this emotion. It's all like very raw. And then I wouldn't be surprised if they went into recording Doom and like all of their respective like grieving scenes pretty soon afterwards in order to like keep that emotional level. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Which means like Freddie would have been there, and you're just like,
oh my God.
Lots of sadness.
It's so sad because they do talk about a lot how Dave is so good with actors to like get those emotional performances out of them. So I'm sure that was a tactic that they took. Oh
yeah.
My God. But like Caitlin and I have wine tonight. Loyal listeners will know it's infrequent for me to have wine when we record, and that's when you know. It's just when you know.
It's serious. Yeah. They talk about that with Ahsoka and Anakin too, when they were recording like the end of Clone Wars, how all of that was really emotional for like Matt and Ashley. And then too, when Ahsoka came back in Rebels, they didn't tell her that Matt was recording lines for like the Anakin Vader Ahsoka duel, and how that like completely caught her off guard.
Just like it catches Ahsoka off guard.
Yeah, exactly. You're like,
oh my God.
Dave, what are you doing? But so it's been a while since we've recorded Fulcrum Files, and we have a little bit of a different format than we do for our regular episodes and even our recap episodes of the films. So just to remind everyone, first we're going to start out with a 20-second recap, which will alternate. And I mistakenly thought it was Charlotte's turn, and I made her like get all ready for it, but really it was my turn, which I just found out like half an hour ago. So we'll see how this goes. And then in part 1, we'll each give 2 highs and 1 low from the episode.
And then in part 2, we discuss the story.
And in part 3, characters.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead and do the 20-second recap?
Let me take a sip of wine.
Okay, swig away. Okay, I'm going to count you in, all right?
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
Kanan the samurai tells Ezra to lead the mission to rescue Hera. The crew has arts and crafts time, makes it to the Empire base, and Kanan rescues Hera and her Calicori. At the last second, Kanan sacrifices himself. The crew mourns in their own way, and Ezra meets with the Lothwoods, who tell him there's more knowledge he needs in the Jedi Temple, and so they go to the Jedi Temple, and like Rook gets a clown face.
Wow, you have 2 seconds left.
Whoa.
Yeah. See, it's funny because the 20-second recap is there's a lot of pressure, you know, but it's not that bad, right? Like you can get stuff in.
Yeah, you can. It's just I didn't want to do this episode.
You didn't really mention anything with Rook.
I just said he got a clown face.
Oh yeah, you did. Oh my gosh.
Lots of arts and crafts in this episode.
I know. I was going to bring that up later, but yes, I liked how you said arts and crafts. It's very crafty. But solid 20-second recap. I give it an A-.
Oh, okay.
You definitely could have fit in something else about...
I had 2 seconds.
Yeah. You definitely could have fit in something about Thrawn, but I'll let it slide. We'll talk about it later.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so let's go to our part 1, highs and lows.
There are whispers of this alleged Jedi in the streets. In time, such whispers might spark belief in something other than the strength and security of the Empire. And that, gentlemen, is something I cannot have.
Okay, Caitlin, what is your first high?
My first high is all of the voice acting in this episode was just superb. And we all know that Vanessa Marshall everyone always talks about how great her voice is, which is true, and it is. But for me, the real standout of this episode was Taylor Gray, particularly as Ezra in Doom. And when the moments that really like caught my attention were when he was like waking up from his dreams and like calling out Kanan's name. I was just like, oh, heart clench. He did a really great job, and I was really impressed.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. You only mentioned Vanessa Marshall like for 5 seconds, but I really think that I agree Taylor Gray was amazing, but Vanessa Marshall was the standout in this episode for me. Just because I just really want to meet her too. Like a lot of things. I'm just like, I feel like this is my high. I loved high Hera, drunk Hera, high Hera, like on the truth serum. I don't know what we're calling it. I did hashtag high Hera. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm going to start a thing. But that was, okay. It was like my favorite Hera moment that we've seen. It was so funny. So great.
It was weird. I really liked High Hera, but then I also it's like it's kind of weird that there's this comedy coming out of like her torture scene, which
kids show.
I know, but still, it's like the true serum droid is like they make a really big deal out of it in A New Hope, and also in Rebels. So I really liked High Hera, but it was still kind of weird to me, this juxtaposition of this really like comedic moment for her after she was just tortured.
I totally get that, but I like the fact that when she says "I love you" to Kanan later, it gives her that excuse to be like, it gives her that ability to be like, this isn't the truth serum talking. I'm being 100% genuine, and I like that. And without that precedent, it's just like, of course, it would have been a genuine moment, but it has that kind of weight on it because of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I thought the moments were really funny with Hera too. Like when Kanan's like, I got you a present, and it's her Calicori, and she's like, Kanan, this is mine. It's not a present if it's already mine.
It's so good. See, Vanessa Marshall was so good in that scene. It was like,
yeah,
perfect.
She is. It's really funny. It was really funny. Okay, so my other high was the music. I feel like I talked about the music a lot for my highs, but I really loved this, how particularly during Kanan's sacrifice, it was the music throughout all of Jedi Night was very different than kind of the other swan songs, I guess, we've had in Clone Wars and in Rebels, particularly with Ahsoka, and then like Sabine's themes during the Mandalore arcs. It was very different, but still kind of tied together with those themes that we've seen too, kind of like with the chorus that was going on. It was all, I don't know, it was different, and I really liked it. At first, when we first saw the clip of Kanan cutting his hair last week or earlier this week, I think, I was like, what is this music? I think I texted you about it. I was like, how do I feel about this music? It was kind of like a little upbeat. It was a little weird. But then like seeing it all together in the episode, I really liked how everything tied together musically.
Well, it's definitely upbeat because Kanan has now accepted his fate and his purpose, and he knows his purpose, and it's not something to be mourned. It's something to be rejoiced about. And I think that's really cool that Kevin Kiner was able to like work that in and let that shine. And I love the music in Rebels. It's just gotten better and better and better. It just continues to surprise me. It doesn't have to be this good. It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And this is one of those moments, because I'm pretty sure Kevin Kiner doesn't record with an orchestra. He it's all on his computer, but it's like these big moments that he actually uses like live recordings for. Yeah. So I wonder if they did that for this moment, because they did that for Ahsoka Leaves. And it was like there was like some story, I don't know if it's true or not, but that like Kevin Kiner like paid for it with his own money to like have this actual live recording for the Ahsoka Leaves track.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, but that would be cool if that was real.
And I don't remember if it's real, but I swear I've heard it somewhere. So if you guys know if it's real or fake, let us know. But either way, it's a great track. So I wonder if we'll hear about that, if they did something similar for Kanan's sacrifice.
Probably someday on the bonus features. I can't wait to buy like a box set of all Rebels together.
Same. So what was yours?
Yes. All right. This is my second high. I loved the characterization of everyone dealing with Kanan's death. It was like I just had this feeling that we had built up these characters so much in the past 4 seasons that we knew exactly how they would react, and their reactions were perfect. Like Sabine throwing her helmet. I was like, she would throw her helmet. That is exactly how she would have reacted. And also when she pulls away and wipes her tears and just continues on, it's like, oh my God, this is so Sabine. Ezra being confused, not really knowing how to voice it. And then Zeb giving Ezra a hug and like bringing him close. It's just like I had this feeling where I was like, oh my God, these characters have gone so far. Do you remember when we met Ezra and how Ezra and Zeb had such a rivalry? And they always butt heads, and in this moment they totally lean on each other, and oh my God. And then Hera having to deal with Kanan's death in her own way, and she can't be the general that they need her to be. So, man, I was just, I was overwhelmed by how that was so great, and how that was written and depicted so perfectly in my mind.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think that's part of why the emotions hit so much harder in watching Rebels more so than The Last Jedi, because we were given time with these characters to grieve and to watch them go through the motions of sadness, which we obviously empathize with them. And so we start feeling their sadness too, whereas with, the saga films, you don't necessarily have that kind of time to dwell. You get like a couple seconds and snatches of it here and there, but you can't have like the whole first half of an episode, really a whole episode that's devoted to it.
Right. Okay, so what's your low?
So my low was I did not like the pacing of Jedi Night. It just I can't even really pinpoint what it is, but everything felt kind of rushed at the end and a little bit throughout too. And there was this constant like, is this it? Is this it for Kanan? Is this it? And I didn't like that feeling. It kind of was taking me out of it. Like, oh, it's coming. Oh, it's here with Rook. Oh, it's here with the Empire. Oh, it's here at the explosion. Wait, it's the explosion. What? And I don't know. The pacing just didn't work really well for me in Jedi Knight overall. And I think maybe it was because we all kind of came in with this expectation that Kanan was going to die, and it was just a matter of what if. And I feel like the episode played too heavily into that anticipation of the audience.
Right. I always feel like there's something like super meta about the fact that we know that we only have 3 weeks left of Rebels. And I wonder if we'd feel the same way about like that inevitability and like us looking for when Kanan is going to die or whatever, if we had known that there was going to be like another season. Because these are situations that the Rebels have been in throughout this entire series, and it's not like completely out of the ordinary to think like, are Rebels going to make it through it? But by knowing the fact that there's only like 3 or 4 or whatever episodes left, like we always, I don't know, it's always in the back of our mind is who's going to survive, who's not, when in season 1 it's not really a question.
Yeah.
I always kind of think about those things because it's like, if we just didn't know that like extra piece of like this show is ending, I wonder if that kind of stuff would have bothered us. Because I'm with you. I agree. It did kind of take me out of it as well. But maybe not as much as you.
Yeah. I kind of think about when we were watching the end of season 5 of Clone Wars, like knowing that this was kind of how everything ends for Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying, and I can't really remember, but I'm trying to remember if I felt the same way. And I probably didn't, because it was 4 episodes solidly focused on Ahsoka, as opposed to 1.5 episodes, really one that was actually had Kanan in it. So there's definitely a little difference there.
Totally. And also Ahsoka didn't die. Like I know it's a hard comparison, but it's a good comparison because it's like we were still left with that like tiny bit of hope that we'd see Ahsoka again, where Kanan is gone. Sure, he could be reincarnated. I guess it is a good comparison because we have the same thoughts about Ahsoka now after Malachor. But I think that moment though, like we knew what was going to happen to Anakin as well. It's like we really have like question marks over every single one of our characters. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if I feel like there was a little bit more hope with Ahsoka and her character in that moment than there is with Kanan's sacrifice here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes back into like the timelines of these shows too. Mm-hmm. Like with Clone Wars, you're like, oh, there's still a lot of time to play with Ahsoka's timeline. Whereas with Kanan, we're butting up really close to A New Hope. And we're actually going to, and Rogue One. And we're going to talk about that later too, about like these storylines and our Rebels characters in them. But it is interesting comparing the two. But what was your low for this episode?
My low is like super petty, but I hate Rook, whatever. Yeah, and I just want him to die. And I like every time he shows up, I'm like, I hate this character so much. I just like I don't like this.
Yeah, I don't really love Rook either. I guess I don't really feel any two ways about him. Yeah, he's kind of there. He feels kind of thrown in this last season. And obviously, as you guys know, Charlotte and I haven't read Heir to the Empire, so we don't really have any kind of connection to him. Like, I'd much rather see Price and Thrawn going at it and trying to get the Rebels back. And like, I would almost rather see like Price send some like dumb henchmen or something.
Yeah. It's not even an EU thing for me. It's like I legit don't like this character, and I think he's like really frustrating to me, and he just keeps popping up in situations where I'm just like, I'm done with it. It feels very filler to me, and I don't like it. Yeah, well, he's supposed to be this like super intense bounty hunter. Is he a bounty hunter? I think he's more than a bounty hunter.
Yeah, he's like leveled up bounty hunter, and he can like, the idea is that he's the best of the best, but he's been around now for a while and still hasn't gotten the upper hand on the Rebels. So I'm like, Where's your threat? Whereas I know that's the same issue with Thrawn, but it's almost like to a certain degree, like Thrawn's above what's going on the ground. And when he chooses to insert himself into the thick of it, that's when things get a little dicey. But I don't know. For me, Thrawn is a bigger threat and he's much more interesting. And I don't know why that is, but I like seeing Thrawn on screen more than I do Rook.
I know why that is, because they've developed his character as an interesting villain who's not, cut from a cookie cutter of dark side evil. And he is complicated, has an interest in art, which is something you don't really see. Like, there's a lot that is very compelling about Thrawn that is just not present with Rook. So,
You're right.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. And he has a great music theme and an amazing voice actor. And there's like a lot of compelling things about
You're
Thrawn.
Right. There's a lot.
So
okay, I know why I like Thrawn better. Which, can I just say, I'm in a class all about international conservation, and we talk about the destruction of cultural heritage a lot and the appropriation of cultural heritage. And so the whole thing with the Calicori, I was like, Thrawn! Let's talk about UNESCO and the World Heritage Convention and like all these things that are wrong with what you're doing. So I was like relating it to my studies.
Good.
So like, thanks, Dave.
Okay, so let's move on to the story.
Yes.
We will not rest until we bring an end to the Empire, until we restore our Republic. Are you with me?
All right, welcome to part 2, where we're going to be talking all about the story over the course of these 2 episodes. So how did we feel about these episodes individually and as a 2-part arc?
I'm so glad we got them as a 2-parter.
Oh, yeah.
Because a week with to wait for these, I would have gone crazy.
Same.
But, and I think that your comment before about like the pacing and the questioning, I think for me it kind of goes away when there's that second episode that you can pair with it. I just don't have that same problem that you do with it. I loved them both, and I really like what they did for our characters.
Yeah, I mean, overall I agree, and like the pacing low it's not like a huge deal for me, especially when it's put together with part 2. And I really love the amount of time that we got to grieve with our characters. I thought it was really done really well. And one of the things I loved most about this episode was my realization of the impact of Kanan's death along with the characters, because I didn't realize at the time that the explosion like destroyed the fuel cell and like therefore shut down the production of the
TIE Defender.
Yeah, of the TIE Defenders. And I didn't really make that connection right away. And then they started talking about it in part 2 in Doom. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, it's not just Kanan didn't get out in the nick of time kind of thing. Because I've seen some comments that like the Rebels and Jedi have all been in a similar situation where they've been in an explosion and like just got out in the nick of time. So like, why is it this time that they don't get out in the nick of time? And I liked how there was kind of this bigger picture that was going on. And I like that I didn't realize that initially. And I kind of got to figure that out with the characters too. Like when Sabine and Zeb tell Hera about, and they're like, no, not only did Kanan save us, but he saved like our mission here too.
Mm-hmm. And I think that it sets up a larger kind of the state of the rebellion situation where this was such a... Okay, it's a devastating loss that we have lost Kanan in our Ghost crew, of course. But it's a big win because now the halting of the TIE Defender is pretty comparable as they make that comparison with Thrawn and Tarkin to the Stardust Project, which we know is the Death Star. So these are 2 huge threats to the Rebel Alliance, to the galaxy at large. And it's like until that moment when Thrawn is talking to Tarkin, you don't realize like these are 2 projects that are competing with each other, and they are both huge threats. And now Kanan's sacrifice has eliminated one of them, and we know that Luke Skywalker will eliminate the other, and so will the Rogue One crew, etc. But it's
it's almost sounded like you said Excedrin.
This is an ad for Excedrin.
Sponsor us.
But do you know what I mean though? It's like we always talk about, and we didn't lead with this question in Fulcrum Files of like, what's the state of the rebellion? And at this moment, the state of the rebellion, while seemingly like devastating because they don't have reinforcements from Yavin and they are kind of confused about what to do. And this moment, they still have this like big win that they just did.
They're given the upper hand in the midst of this great loss.
Exactly. And it's kind of awesome that now, if this is the end of Rebels, which we know it is, then that's a really good note to leave it on, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. It was like everything clicked for me once we figured that. It was like, oh, okay, so like you said, the Death Star is being created, Stardust, and obviously Tarkin is like, it almost sounds like Tarkin's ready to cut his losses, and I wonder how that will play into our end of Thrawn as well, if we get to see that in Rebels. And then two, I wonder if now if Mon Mothma gets word that they really have this chance to like really take out this big threat to the rebellion here on Yavin, now that they kind of have this moment where the fuel cell is broken. I wonder if the rebellion will come back and like help them really take out the production plant there, or if they will leave it up to, whoever is left on Lothal.
I wonder too, because I could see it as, and of course this is all going to be like obsolete discussion in 2 weeks, but I can see them being like a ragtag group of whoever's left on Lothal, kind of finishing what has been started there. Yeah. And then later when Mon Mothma like wants to help the Rogue One crew and realizes that like they can't do this alone because what had just happened on Lothal, and like all those like they need those reinforcements, and having those people around and kind of jump into that cause is like really inspiring because of the loss that they had experienced on Lothal in Rebels. I'm just like, I'm trying to think through about like how we're going to be able to view Rogue One a little bit differently now, having this story in the back of our minds. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah, no, me too. Absolutely. I think it'll be really interesting. So we talked about this a little bit in part one, but and a while ago too. I can't remember if it was Fulcrum Files or just like an episode about I love Dave Filoni, but Dave made these comments at one point about learning, and can't remember how he phrased it, but basically coming to understand characters that operate within like Clone Wars and particularly in Rebels as more than just a footnote to our greater saga stories. And he talked about this in Rebels Recon too, about Kanan doesn't die because Yoda says there are no Jedi left. Like we can't look at these characters like this because that removes their agency in this galaxy. We can't look at them as like they're only tied to the saga films. Like Ahsoka has to die because she's not in Revenge of the Sith. That was, we shouldn't have thought about her like that. And so he mentioned that too, like about Kanan, and Kanan has to die to be an example of selflessness for Ezra and the Ghost Crew and the rebellion. So do we think that that's being accomplished in Rebels, of making sure that characters like Kanan aren't just a quote unquote footnote to the greater saga stories?
I mean, my inclination is that I trust Dave Filoni, and I think that he won't just be a footnote in the saga films. And I think that there's still episodes to go that will reinforce kind of Kanan's overall legacy and the Ghost Crew legacy in general. I think that there's a lot of mythology to be told in the next like couple of hours of Rebels, including bringing it all back around with Mortis, which we all know is very, very heavy Jedi Force mythology. So I feel like I have this feeling that they won't be just a footnote, and I think that Dave understands that and is trying his best to make sure that doesn't, they're not just supporting these like larger films, right?
Yeah.
I trust in him.
Yeah, and that's such a hard line to be balancing, because you don't want them to act like a footnote, but Yoda did say there are no more Jedi. So
Right.
how do you make sure you're accomplishing both of those goals? And I read this really interesting Tumblr post the other day. Not the other day. It was today. They went on this crazy, I'll call it my crazy conspiracy theory and hope it's right, because my crazy conspiracy theory for The Last Jedi turned out to be right. But basically, it said that this crazy conspiracy theory that Kanan didn't actually die, that the Force, because we kind of see this like Force push, like we see the energy of the Force around him, and that it actually like transported him to the Jedi Temple. And then when the Loth Wolf is telling him, you've got to go to the Jedi Temple, that's why Kanan has to, or why Ezra has to go to the Jedi Temple, because not only is there knowledge there that relates to Mortis and, you know, whatever is going on there, but also Kanan's there. So maybe he's not really dead yet, or I don't know. We'll see his Force ghost or something there. I don't know. I'm just saying there could be a possibility that Kanan's not actually dead.
I think Kanan's actually dead because I think that he's the wolf. I think it's very clear to me that he's the wolf, and I feel this firmly in my bones. And prove me wrong. That would be great. But
at her, guys, at her.
Yeah, I mean, it's his voice. The giant wolf that talks to Ezra is Freddie Prinze Jr. The wolf literally says, "I am Doom, Caleb Doom." His eye shield is literally wolf's eyes before. It's like it has been his destiny to kind of reincarnate as the wolf. And it's like, I don't think after these 2 episodes we are to say that, like, we can't answer the question as to why. And I think we'll figure it out, and as we've been finding out. I saw someone make a cool comparison, because I think at this point, like, Kanan and Ahsoka are pretty comparable as two figures in the Star Wars world who have probably transcended death in this way to kind of be a part of the living force and kind of like reincarnate in these different creatures. I think in the trailer we saw potentially Ahsoka, I'm not for sure, as the Convor, and I think we've seen now Kanan as the wolf, and he's met his destiny as the wolf, and it's like, I think that Ezra is going to find these answers and find out why and how do these things all relate to each other whenever he discovers that, like, beautiful mural of father, daughter, and son that we see in the trailer. But I'm pretty confident that, like, I'm here for your theory as always, Caitlin. But I'm pretty confident that he's the wolf, and which means he didn't really die, right? Because it's, of course, like, I don't know, he becomes part of the living force.
It's interesting because we kind of talked about this a little bit off air about how I wasn't sure how I felt about Kanan being the wolf, because it just, like, we know that Kanan's had a connection to the wolves, obviously, with the Doom prior to this episode, kind of throughout season 4. But it's really been Ezra who's had this, you know, outstanding connection to animals. And so it seems kind of strange that it would now be Kanan who's actually reincarnated as an animal. But as you were, and I wasn't really sure how I felt about that, but as you were talking, it actually got me thinking a little bit about, you know, if Kanan is reincarnated, his Force spirit is a part of this wolf, however it works out, like if Kanan is the wolf, then it makes sense, because Ezra does have these connections to animals, and maybe now he's the only one who's, like, able to really commune with Kanan.
Exactly.
Because of the master-apprentice relationship they've built up.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And I think that this entire series, they've touched on how Ezra has this connection with creatures, and Kanan even says, you're a good listener, it's going to serve you well in the future. And it's because he's going to find something out. He's going to have to, like, he has to listen, has to discern, and listen to these wolf creatures who are, we have to have the closed captioning on to understand what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's just, he's going to learn something and have to take it in and accept it, and in a way that we've seen him do throughout this entire series. He understands creatures, he understands species, and he believes people in a way that we haven't seen any of the other characters overall.
Yeah, exactly. But then part of me is like, why didn't Kanan just say, it's me? It's Kanan. And I know he said, I'm Doom. It's Doom. But, like, obviously, that's not working. Why didn't he just say, like, yo, kid, it's me. Come to the Jedi Temple if you want to live, you know? Like,
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have those answers. Like, same.
Yeah.
So.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think that's probably what'll happen. But I also remember Dave saying at one point too how audiences think they want really bittersweet, like tragic endings like this, but in actuality, they really don't. We all really want happy endings for our characters. So I don't know. I'm still going to hold on a little bit to my conspiracy theory that maybe Kanan's not actually dead. But generally speaking, I think he's definitely dead. High probability he could be the wolf, and low probability that he isn't actually dead or like is existing on some other plane, not as the wolf.
Yep.
So basically anything is up for grabs in my book. Those are all the possibilities, and I believe in all of them.
I just want to bring up something before we jump into the character discussion and everything. I just think it's really cool how Rebels, especially this season, has kind of, and maybe not this season, maybe I can't say that, but the whole kind of impact and symbolism behind art has kind of taken center stage in this story. And I mean, we have the Kalikori, which, you know, Hera regains and then adds Kanan to, which is just such a beautiful symbolism of like, he's gone but not forgotten, but like always part of her family, and kind of like reinventing the past and like it's just amazing. And the cave paintings or whatever is going to come with Mortis, I think that is obviously very important. And obviously that's a form of artwork. And even Sabine has been, I mean, the core of Sabine's character is her art. And I think that like, that definitely means something. It's like her creative expression. And I just think it's really cool how it's been worked into Star Wars so much through this series. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, you and I both come from art and art history backgrounds. So it's really neat to see those kinds of things represented in the Star Wars galaxy. And, you know, particularly for me, like this idea of like heritage and history, and the characters are aware of that within the galaxy too, through things like the Kalikori and, you know, with the history of Mortis, if we're going to learn more about that. And then, you know, Sabine's own like cultural appreciation for her Mandalore past, while also kind of bringing in her own flair with her own artwork. You're right. It is really nice to see those things represented here and throughout Rebels.
It's also like a little meta too. I mean, I always like to talk about how Star Wars is super meta, but lately it really is. I mean, the style of Rebels is all Ralph McQuarrie, and it's like we worship these old concepts and kind of incorporate them into like present day Star Wars. And it's like the art never dies, and how important that art is in this story and in this myth. It's just really cool.
It is. I agree.
Anyway, so do you want to move on to talk about the characters?
I'm going to be sad, but yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Well, my name's Ezra. This is Kanan. That's Sabine and Zeb. It's nice to meet you, 7567.
Actually, my name is Rex, Captain, 501st Clone Battalion.
All right, welcome to part 3, where we're talking all about characters. So take a sip of wine, settle in. Let's start with Kanan.
Okay.
So all throughout Jedi Night, it's kind of we all kind of knew it was coming. Did Kanan know it was coming?
Oh, of course. He totally knew.
Yeah.
And he was going to tell Hera about it, but ended up not being able to.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what he was going to tell Hera, and not so much that Kanan knew he was going to die, but he knew it was a possibility that he was going to die. And so he was I think he was going to tell Hera, I love you. Because of him kind of recognizing the possibility that he might not make it out of this moment. And I remember texting you during it, and I was like, if that is the last moment that we get of Kanan, Ezra, and Sabine, where he's like, may the force be with you, and like dashes off, it was like, oh man.
And it was. So
it was so, it reminded me so much of Revenge of the Sith with Anakin and Obi-Wan. You know, there's that last moment and it's just tinged with this sadness because you know they're never going to be together again.
I know. It's really rough. But I mean, he did say right before he left, you're a good listener. And I feel like that kind of reinforces everything that's Ezra is, right? I don't know. And I feel like that was a really meaningful conversation. And even like you could definitely compare it to Obi-Wan and Anakin's last moments and what Obi-Wan tells Anakin and how that sort of it's very sad, but it's a sentiment that we can see carried throughout the saga.
Yeah, and there are all these nice little moments for Kanan throughout this episode too that are foreshadowing, but also just I don't know, they're just these nice callbacks to who he is. And like when before they leave and Zeb says, you know, I'm glad the Force is with you. And the Force was with him. And Kanan like accepted his fate, whatever it was going to be. And I think you texted me this too about like Kanan had his own peace and purpose moment like Luke does in The Last Jedi. It just...
Yeah, and he gains his sight back because he has that sort of clarity at the end of this is what he's supposed to do. This is his act of selflessness, and he earned that ability to see the person he loves for the last time. I know, it's like really emotional. I'm struggling getting the sentences out, but you know.
Yeah. Well, in Rebels Recon, I can't remember if it was Dave or Killian who mentioned that it's almost like at this point he's energy, like he's the Force energy now. And it's almost like that's how he's seeing her. Not necessarily that he quote unquote gained his eyesight back, because at this point he's already becoming one with the Force in a way. They just kind of hinted at that. They didn't really give it a definitive, that's what happened. But I just thought that it was an interesting way of looking at that moment too, of this like last moment of his life too. Either way, it's like he got to see Hera.
Yeah.
And that is just heart-wrenching. And she sees that he saw her.
Right. And it's like he didn't say I love you back, but in that moment it's like those actions kind of speak louder than words could ever. And it's like she knows that there was like mutuality between their relationship was real and the most real.
Yeah, and she doesn't even say anything about that later on in Doom when she's kind of living in her own guilt. She's talking about how she wished she had said it sooner, but she never says something like, I don't know if he feels the same way back. That's not even a question for her.
No. Oh man, let's talk about Hera then, because her dealing with that guilt, again, it's those kind of comments and like situations and discussions that make me really love the complications between like the politics of Star Wars and the history of like getting involved in a fight and everything. I love callbacks like that where people are kind of, I mean, I don't want to say I love when people are ridden with guilt because this is a really sad situation, but I really do kind of, I love those like moments of like, oh my God, maybe we shouldn't be here. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. And it gives a greater purpose to like the future when Hera will like regain that strength that we know that she has to lead this final battle.
And it just reminds us too of these really great Kanan and Hera moments, like when they were having that tension about whether or not to be in the rebellion. And Hera was all for it and Kanan wasn't. And she was constantly asking him, you know, talk to me, tell me what's wrong, we'll figure it out. And it brings you back to those really nice moments between them where even when they weren't agreeing, they were still on the same side.
Right. I love Star Wars. See, that kind of stuff is so good. That sentence that you just said, even when they weren't agreeing, they were still on the same side. It's like they can have these complicated opinions about these different things that each person is passionate about and still be there for each other.
And it's weird because we haven't really seen a romantic couple do that in Star Wars.
Kanan and Hera were 100% the healthiest we've ever seen in Star Wars ever.
Any relationship.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Too healthy. That's why they had to end tragically.
I mean, every Star Wars couple has ended tragically.
True.
So, I mean, the jury's still out on a couple of them for episode 9, but there'll probably be some bouts of sadness in there too, however it shakes out.
Rose aren't like eternally happy. Like, I'm gonna be sad.
Like, what's going on? What's going on?
Anyway, we can't talk about Rebels without talking about The Last Jedi. Oh God,
we can't talk about Star Wars without talking about The Last Jedi. Sorry, bye.
But we mentioned this before. I loved High Hera. I thought it was great, and I loved. I don't know. I just loved that whole part. I think it was a great addition to her character, and kind of like showed her like letting those walls that we know that she has down a little bit.
Yeah, and too, when just the beginning part when she's still trapped in the like torture chair, and she's telling the stormtroopers, you guys are in big trouble. And they're like, what? And then the lightsaber comes through, and she's like, oh, I thought he was going to come through the window.
It's so good.
Her voice acting was like spot on in that whole sequence. It was really great. And then, of course, too, when they do the crash landing, and she goes, or Kanan says, another great crash landing. And she goes, I don't have crash landings.
Yeah.
I know. Only
like,
exciting.
I know. It's so great.
Oh my gosh. And when they're like, oh, the kids are picking us up over.
Oh my gosh. That was the best ever.
Oh my God.
The kids made, oh my God.
The kids made them.
The kids came up with that one.
They might have said, I love you, Mom and Dad on it. In spray paint.
I was like, I love this family. Oh my God.
Oh, I'm so sad about this family, and still holding on to crazy conspiracy number 3 that Caden's not dead.
And then also let's talk about Chopper reaching out his hand. I think that honestly might be the number one most devastating thing I've seen in Rebels.
Yes, but I gotta say that when their ship came down and Zeb was smiling up at them,
oh my God, I know.
I think
that was so real. Like,
yeah.
that just was like a really, like, life is going on, and here they come, gonna have like another landing and meet up with Zeb, and Zeb is just waving happily, like, oh, great, another successful mission.
They're back, yay.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of relatable. Like, I feel like we've all been in those situations where we're like, oh my God, hey, and then it's like the other person is like, the worst thing just happened, and you're like, oh God.
Yeah. I think because when they were coming in for landing, I had forgotten all about Zeb, TBH, and I saw him, and my heart just broke. I was like, they have to tell him. I was like, who's going to tell him? How is that going to play out? And I just started bawling all over again. But I gotta say, one of the character moments I really, kind of moving on a little bit to talk about Ezra, it's weird not weird, but it's cool how we see the death of Kanan really break Ezra in this film, because in this episode, it's basically a short movie. Because in the first part of Jedi Knight, we're really seeing Ezra like step up to the plate. He's really being a leader. Kanan gives him the most important task of leading the mission to rescue Hera. And then two, one of the moments I loved in this, I almost said film, in this episode was when right as Kanan dies and Kanan pushes Hera back again, and Ezra grabs her to hold on to her because he knows she's going to try and run again. And he knows that like he needs to like keep Hera with him. You know, it was almost like this like moment of connection with him and Kanan. Like he knew that Kanan had to do this, and he had to keep Hera with him, or else Hera would die too.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
It really broke my heart.
Yeah.
It was like, oh gosh.
Yeah.
And he wasn't able to go. Like Ezra probably wanted to do the same thing Hera was doing, but he knew he couldn't. And he wouldn't be able to stop what was going on right now. But then we see him really break down when they get back to the Rebel base. And Dave talks about it a little bit in Rebels Recon about Ezra reverting back to his selfishness almost, and making this whole situation about him and how, you know, what am I going to do without him? I can't go on without him. He was my master. And it was a really big contrast between him in these two episodes.
It's also interesting, and maybe this is, again, like I'm thinking way too deeply about things, but you know how when he was sitting down and doing that like eeny, meeny, miny, mo, rhyme and like trying to choose a different path to take, and because he was lost.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's like Lothrat, Lothwolf, Lothbat, run, pick a path, and all is done. And
so ominous.
Well, it's just like I don't believe that. Like I don't like that rhyme because you don't pick a path and everything is done. That goes kind of completely against what Star Wars is. It's like you choose a path, but like the whole like thing that Yoda says, like forever will dominate your destiny. Maybe, but like you don't have to. You can pick a path and then you can change later. You can always change. And it's like in that moment, he's lost and he's looking around and he's trying to pick a path and he doesn't really know where to go. I've just been thinking a lot about that moment and what that like rhyme even means.
He wants an easy decision. It's this childhood rhyme. That's a game, and he doesn't want to be thinking like an adult in this moment. He wants to be thinking like a kid. But I think I've seen some people speculate too. I mean, the rhyme obviously has this very foreboding tone over the whole tail end of Rebels about what path are all of our characters going to take. And I definitely think some people have speculated that it could connect back to kind of dark side Ezra.
Right.
Which I don't think Ezra will turn to the dark side. I do wonder if he'll be tempted by the dark side. And I could see a situation where Palpatine's like playing into Ezra's grief over Kanan and trying to lure him to give into those emotions. Best. Yeah, exactly. So it'll be those will be some, if that happens, if it plays out like that, those will be really interesting to compare to Anakin and Revenge of the Sith and Palpatine manipulating him with Padme.
Even with Snoke and Kylo, like it's going to be a great comparison with like this evil, illustrious master of the dark. So we'll see. But I've just been. You're right. He wants an easy decision, and it's just not coming to him. He repeats the rhyme a couple times, and he doesn't make a decision.
Yeah.
So curious.
So anything else we want to say about some of our characters? I mean, I know we really didn't even get to talk about Sabine or Ezra or Zeb all too much in this episode. But they responded how I thought they would respond. But I like how they didn't follow through with their, well, I'm going to go like show up to the parade and blow some things up. You know, I like how because you see Thrawn talking when he's talking to Price and he's like, they're going to try and do something reckless. And he's completely right about it. But Sabine and Zeb are like, wait a second. Let's think this through. I liked how they didn't end up letting Thrawn have the upper hand on them in that moment.
No, and I love how Sabine stopped Zeb from like brutally killing Rook. And I was this morning when I was watching Rebels Recon, Disney XD had like this autoplay option and like the Kanan's death scene played, and then this one scene from Siege of Lothal played, and I thought this quote was so good, and we hear it a lot. It's a pretty like widely used Rebels quote, but it's in Siege of Lothal. Kanan says, "The greater courage is knowing when not to fight," and in that moment, Sabine kind of took that knowledge and was like, no. Like, this is cruel. We're letting our emotions get the better of us. And we just need to kind of destroy him in a more hilarious way and tag him the way that we know how when she paints him. And it's great.
Yeah. But, and sending a message back to the Empire too. Yeah,
totally. Wait, so I want to talk about one last thing before we wrap up. I think it's so interesting that they faded to white when at the end of Jedi Night, and how the logo in the next in Doom was also white, and then on Rebels Recon everything was kind of in black and white in terms of the graphics. And I've just been trying to like think obviously through it, and there's a lot of symbolism that goes with like the color white, or the not color white. Is that debated? Anyway.
The absence of color.
Yeah.
Is white.
So obviously, like at the very end, it fades to white, and we're supposed to think of like a white light because Kanan's dead, right? And he sees the white light. But I do think that what is there's something with the white Loth cat. Like, what is up with this color? Like, Kanan becomes this like big giant white wolf, and it's like I think they're trying to tell us to care about think a little bit more about these colors, like even with Dave's hashtag follow the White Loth Cat and everything. It's like, what does it all mean? I don't know what it means. I just think it's worth noting.
Same. I don't know what it means either, but it's similar to The Last Jedi. Here I go again, Last Jedi reference with the color red. It's like red had like a meaning and a symbolism in the film, but it's not exactly a definitive symbolism. It's not like we don't look at The Last Jedi and say the red means this specifically. It means a lot of different things in a lot of different context throughout the movie. So I wonder if it's the same thing with the color white. But you're right. There has been this really big emphasis on the color white. And I mean, white is this, it's the absence of colors, maybe the absence of conflict for Kanan, or the absence of life. Wow, sad. Stepping into the light. I don't know if it could be almost like a visual representation of the Force. I mean, daughter wears white, doesn't she? And Mortis, her dress is white.
Leia wears white.
Leia wears white.
Yeah. You go. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I mean, it was just kind of not dumb, but I don't really think it means much. But, black and white, the stormtroopers, they're very contrasting. You can almost apply like good and evil to those colors too. Mm-hmm. So...
Well, true. And I was just thinking that when you were mentioning The Last Jedi and the color red, I mean, I immediately think about the crate battle at the end and how the salt flats is all white and how salt represents, and salt and like white is like pretty cleansing. So what does it all mean? I don't know. I don't know.
A purifying light.
Yeah, I think that, I do think there's something there, and it's like, it's worth kind of thinking about a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we need more information, though.
Yes. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up, right, Caitlin? You have anything else to say?
I'm sad. I'm ready for next week. I'm ready to return to Mortis for my mind to be melted. And I think I'm ready to see Ahsoka again, if that's coming down the pipeline. But I'm not sure how I'm going to respond.
I honestly think that's coming next. So
I think so too, and I don't know how to handle it.
I know. Well, we'll deal with it when we get there. Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that it's going to wrap up this emotional episode, Jedi Night and DUME of Fulcrum Files. We'll be back next week, probably around the same time, to recap the next 2 episodes of Rebels. And you guys know where to find us. You can find us on Twitter at Skytalkers Pod. Our individual Twitters, at Caitlin Plusher is mine, and at Clarity is Charlotte's. We also have a website, skytalkers.com. And if you like what you hear, you, of course, can head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and tell us your thoughts. We really appreciate them. Or you can email us at skytalkers. You can email us skytalkerspodcast@gmail.com too, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts.
Definitely. And I just want to take this moment to thank our amazing patrons: Lynn, Amy, Ryan, Neil, Jim, Swara, BJ, Joanna, Chuck, Aaron, Cherie, Kyle, Megan, Amy, Kelly, Matt, Brandon, Serene, David, Kirsty, Robbie, Derek, Connie, Delaney, and Daz. Thank you guys so much. And of course, you can always, if you're interested in supporting us, you can go to our Patreon page. It is patreon.com/Skytalkers. Yeah, just Skytalkers. And
Skytalkers.
On the $3 tier and above, you get access to our monthly recorded Patreon episodes where we choose a topic and talk freely about it. So we'd love to see you there, and we'd love if you could support us there. And we'll see you next time. Bye. May the Force be with you.
Don't forget to thank Dave Filoni on your way out, and we'll see you next time.